So he was here this morning?
He was here this morning, yes.
Okay. Well, then we'll do this for posterity. Somebody needs to call the meeting to order.
Is it an official agendized meeting?
Well, you tell me.
I kind of set it up like a staff, but
However,
for general.
what would you like us to do, Jane?
Just a general informal, feel like a
Okay.
staff, so.
I mean, may I start it?
Sure.
Or would you like Joe to
If
start?
no,
Would you like to
it's-
start?
All right, I'll call the meeting to order. We'll forego the Pledge of Allegiance only because we've already said it.
No, maybe.
And we'll move to item number 2 if there's no objection to skipping past 1.
No objection.
So we're on to number 2.
So, this particular time and place was set up. I had extended an offer to Mr. Marek for a transition meeting. He accepted my offer, and we set the time and place as today at 1 o'clock. I prepared for that meeting. So we don't know for sure if he's,
I thought he said he had a meeting, but I left a message for him to give a call back.
did he anticipate on canceling this meeting or what? And this meeting was for his benefit
Right,
and
I
for
understand.
Larry's, of course. Did he want to reschedule the meeting?
I didn't
When-
ask, so I didn't really.
Well, wait for everybody else then. All right, we get things on the record, I think that would be appropriate. Perhaps John will watch the tape.
I need to get the tape because I was understanding with staff.
We'll wait and get the digital recorder going.
How are you today?
Yeah, thank you for attending, Larry. All right, so we're official, we're on digital recording. Part of the thought I had in going through and bringing some things forward for John and Larry's benefit and perhaps the rest of the group, because we've been going through a lot of things for a long period of time. And there were a number of things said as part of the debate last week, and things that were represented by John that weren't accurate. And I think it's important that that information get out to the public. And as a new member of the board, Larry, I mean, you're probably wondering when you hear, things that are on each side of the spectrum, where that really is. So I did do a full list of information, things that I wanted to touch on, but also wanted to touch on things that were specifically represented by John. One of the things was annexation cannot be forced. That's true, annexation cannot be forced except under certain circumstances, but that was in reference to guarantee of water and sewer. There is no ability for people except under very rare circumstances to receive water and sewer from the city of Waukesha. The map of the areas are here. They're marked water service, sewer service that are outside the city limits. You can see there are very few that have that opportunity. And the reasons that the ones are on there, you can see they're kind of concentrated. The pink is the town of Waukesha, so this is the Sunset Island area. That was by way of an agreement that was done in the 1980s. There's a copy of that file at the town hall that provides for that those folks, through an agreement with Mayor Varakis and Chairman Brunner at the time, certain provisions as to how Sunset Drive would be improved upon. As part of that negotiation, it allowed for City of Waukesha to extend water and sewer without annexation to town of Waukesha residents. So that's why you see a concentration of that in this area. All that infrastructure is put in for them. And then the other areas are around the, basically the fly ash site that is behind the old Don Jacobs, what's now J.D. Byrider site. That's being monitored by the DNR. And they have test wells in that area as well as test wells at the fly ash site. And so they're monitoring those wells on a regular basis. They're looking to see if the plume changes at all, and they may make recommendations for additional people to be on water there. If the DNR has indicated that there is specifically a danger, then depending upon the current makeup of the town, or the city council and the mayor, they will potentially accept someone else to have city water without being annexed. But there is still, in that situation, no guarantee. It's truly on a case-by-case basis as each comes to the Common Council for determination. But that's been the history, at least in that area. We haven't had anybody that's had to be hooked up during the time that we've been in office since July 2010. But we have been in contact. The contact for that is Rhonda Voles, V-O-L-Z. She's a drinking water specialist for the DNR, and she'll be able to help you. And she'll certainly make contact with John at some point in time so that he's aware of what's happening there. On the general water issues, I think that's going to come up at an upcoming meeting. I see that John has backed off of some of his statements regarding the contamination issues in the town. I received many calls from people that he had spoken with immediately before the election on representations that were made that there were significant contamination problems in there. I asked for some additional assistance on that from the DNR, and they provided additional documentation. That documentation Jamie has that indicates that there's no widespread contamination. There's nothing new that we haven't been made aware of, other than what we knew was out there with the molybdenum situation. So there was no evidence of any widespread issues of any kind, and nothing that we weren't aware of previously. The 288 acres, I think everybody knows that's an incorporation, not an annexation. The town of Brookfield is looking to incorporate. They need 4 contiguous square miles in order to do that. They have the square miles, but as far as land mass, but their land mass is not contiguous. And so because it's not contiguous, they determined, because they couldn't find land mass from New Berlin and from other places that they were looking for, to take 288 acres of the town of Waukesha as part of their incorporation process. As everybody knows, we have been moving forward on that on a legislative front. That was made clear in a document that was in the Freeman and by Mr. Marek the other evening. We have been working on that legislative front for about a year. We're doing a 3-prong approach on the town of Brookfield matter. The first is legislative, which we started a year ago, and that's working its way through the process. But that won't stop this process potentially. And it only has to do with the vote, the referendum vote that takes place. There's really no way to stop the other part of the process. That is a legal process to do. It's never been done on a hostile basis, though. And this is what's happening here, is the town of Brookfield is simply trying to take the town of Waukesha's land. That's a hostile takeover, and that's where the referendum change may take place, where we vote independently. Right now, the entire incorporation area, which would include a small amount relatively of the town of Waukesha and a large amount of the town of Brookfield, would vote. And the 300 votes potentially that are in the town of Brookfield would never overcome the 6,000 votes or so that the town of 300 votes in the town of Waukesha would not overcome the 6,000 votes in the town of Brookfield. And so that's an unfair situation. In the ideal world, each municipality would vote for themselves. You know, that small area that's contained, not the entire town, but only the part of the towns that are actually in the incorporation area would vote, but independently. And so that's basically what the new legislation is looking for. Most of the work on this issue has been done. Most of the money has been spent in that area, in my opinion. We simply need to allow the process now to go forward. We're completely prepared for the DOA presentation. It's going to be very important that that information is held confidential, that preparation work and our defense basically needs to be kept secure. And I know there's always a concern about keeping things secure, but this is part of litigation, and I very much hope that there's respect for that information, and that is not revealed to the public until there's the time and place for it, and the time and place for that will be the DOA presentation, when and if that time comes. But all the work's been done, I would say, for that presentation, has been for a while, and now we're just waiting for the Court of Appeals to decide on our appeal of the matter of Judge Hassan's position, and we're waiting for that any day. So it's in the appeals court out of Madison. I think that's number 4. And so Attorney Lang is keeping track of that, and he'll be, advising John and Jamie. As he sees weekly, he checks to see if the decision is forthcoming. So far, we haven't seen anything. Any questions so far on any of that? Okay. The transparent government situation, the 6,000 emails, I believe all the emails have now been picked up. Jamie, is that correct? Mm-hmm. And they were available the week before the election, the last 2 boxes. I think on Wednesday, the week before the election, but they weren't picked up until after the election, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, any question on availability? Those emails were in this office, completely unredacted, starting January 18th. Any of the supervisors were able to come in and look at those documents at any point in time. From that point on, none of them chose to do so. At the point in time that there was a document that came from Attorney Hooker on February 5th indicating that his client, Everett German, wanted to have his own copy and wanted to take them off-site. Taking our official documents off-site is not possible. So when he wanted his own, he needed to pay the 25 cents, and the attorney asked them for them to be redacted. We did not choose to do that. We don't have the ability on our own to decide yes or no. Once that level of document can go out, somebody's got to take a look at them and make sure that there's nothing in there that shouldn't be released. That includes HIPAA-related items. Somebody asked me why that's the case. Many times the chair has employee-related issues that come through email. We have a requirement and can be sued if we release information that is private. And so there is an important matter of keeping emails and any correspondence that goes out of here to make sure that we're not divulging information that's protected. So that issue should be fully resolved. The follow the money issue, I know we've been going through that a number of times. There was a representation made that the crack filling was not done last year and not paid. That's simply untrue. The ditching and road repairs were being moved to 2013, so those works will be done, and we're anticipating the other items that were listed were all capital. Those capital items have all been moved now to the 2013 budget, so we fully did what we represented we were going to do. Those weren't actually savings. Those were simply items that were designated for future use, and that's been properly accounted for now. Five Diamonds. The Five Diamonds issue related to sewer pack is something that I'm assuming they're going to come back to the town board for. Sewer pack has indicated that they received a letter from the Five Diamonds ownership that they would like city sewer and water. That basically means annexation. I don't believe that they'll be included unless, they annex to the city. We'll have to work with council as to how that's going to work out. But the important part of the sewer pack letter is that it clearly indicates that the town of Waukesha now is in control of that circumstance. We have to determine if they're going to even out, which does exactly what we thought it was going to do. It controls annexation. So the board will have to make a decision on the importance of that. But it certainly seems to me that in reading Sewer Pack's letter, it absolutely confirms the position that we have taken, that the water service area is a geographic line, and we'll need to determine if that's going to be increased, and if not, there'll be no water served to anybody who's outside of that area. Questions? Annexations, there was representations made that there's been lots of annexations. Actually not. The annexation that we've dealt with since the water service area initially was the school property and 1 acre lot. That's gone through, or that's going through the process. Since then, there's been 2 others, and both of those, as I'm aware, are in the bypass area. They are west of the Ridge Road, Genesee Sunset intersection, and before Merrill Hills, south of Sunset. So it looks as though that's pre-planning for the bypass eventually, perhaps going through the Pebble Creek corridor. Those properties are basically all in, those 2 are large land masses. For the most part, they're all unbuildable wetlands, other than part of the smart property. So I believe that may be related to the bypass, and then we have the property that is the Hardys, and so that's in that very same area. So I think those are all related to that. I haven't seen anything outside of that as yet. So, and I think we should be surprised by any of those. I mean, the people that are annexing now are people that plan to develop in the city with city sewer and water. And so there's going to be some acceleration of those folks who want to develop that way because they realize that they need to take care of that now because they won't be able to take care of it in the future. So I guess that was an exclamation point on that particular thing. So, all right, snow plowing. Snow plowing will be something that will need, there's a contract that will need to be let for that this year. We did a 1-year contract with Wolf. I think it went very, very well. This was the first year that our DPW staff managed the contractor. Jerry did a marvelous job. I was his secondary contact, and I really can't say enough about how he took control of it, that he worked well and proactively with the contractor. The contractor enjoyed the relationship as well. There were less complaints overall this year, even though it was the first year that Wolf was on board. And so I think that's really a credit. Certainly there were some bumps in the road as individual drivers got to know their routes and things like that, but each and every time it got better. But it is important that someone realizes that we need to let that. It doesn't have to go out for bid. That'll be the choice of the board. It's a service contract, so it does not need to be bid. Anything over $25,000, that's a capital improvement. Those things need to be bid. This does not, but you may want to start that early this year rather than have it go later. Closed sessions, just to clarify for John in the record, closed sessions are not secret. They've been identified as secret meetings. The reason that they're so easily identifiable on our website is because I asked Jamie early on that we agendize those separately. And in many cases, other communities use closed sessions within an existing agenda. So you simply need to look at each agenda, look to see if there's a closed session within that agenda. It makes it much more cumbersome to figure out if a community is having a closed session or not. The town of Brookfield does it that way, the city does it that way. We do not. We notice them. We can certainly still do it, and it'll depend on the board and how they'd like to do that in the future. But I thought it was very important that people, the public, understood why we were having closed sessions. And so having them individually noticed and sent to the media and on the website with a clear description of what was being discussed was just, as best open government as we can, with still having the ability to discuss things under very limited statutory circumstances that allow us to maintain our ability to litigate appropriately or handle personnel matters appropriately. I mean, there is a time and place for those. We had a number of issues going on all at one time in the last 2 years. It certainly created a need for a lot of meetings, and I'm hopeful that there will be many, many fewer. There already have, of course, been many fewer as we've settled issues and as we've completed issues. So I consider that, but none of those meetings were secret since all board members were invited. All board members were typically there, as well as consultants and staff. So I don't consider that to be a secret meeting. Our septic system. We have a letter that was provided to us on February 1st, 2013 by Mike Radomski. He's a supervisor of the Environmental Health Division of Waukesha County Department of Parks and Land Use. And he was called by County Supervisor Walter Kolb to come and inspect our septic system. And so that happened on January 31st. I had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Radomski here, and he was able to ascertain that we have no evidence of a failed septic system. So there's very specific guidelines for a failed septic system. None of those guidelines appear on our property. He also verified that we have appropriate soils because there is already a soil test that's completed and on file with the county. So there is the ability to put in a replacement field if we so choose. That'll be up to obviously the future town board. The reason that, certainly this became a topic of campaign fodder, and that was very unfortunate. It was made to sound as though we had regular backups of septic or sewage in the town hall. That was, of course, not true. That was not happening. But there was some very specific things that happened that created its demise. In my opinion, the test that was done by the fire chief and Mr. Fisher, where they pumped 2,000 gallons of water into our leach area in less than an hour, probably created a failure. And because it's been cold and because it's been raining, we don't know for sure if that is a permanent failure or not of the system as far as its ability to leach at this point. So we're hoping that with some warm weather and with less water flowing in, The ability for that leach to leach appropriately is there. It's not failed in the sense that we need to do something immediate because there's a holding area. The tank is about 5,000 gallons. That's outside of that. So that's been monitored by our staff. And when it reaches a point that it needs to be pumped, it gets pumped so that we're not creating a backup situation or creating a leach, backup issue there. Each year, there's more strain on the system during winter because the fire department and the DPW wash their trucks and clean their trucks inside versus outside. During the summer, and what I should say too is what we've determined is that all of the water from the floor drains, both in the large extension that was done in the fire department and the entire DPW building, all of those floor drains go directly into our leach. That needs to be corrected. Those should be put into separate holding areas, and depending upon if you do a new septic system or if you go with the city, I believe they'll require you as well to put that drainage material that comes off of those floor drains into a separate tank to be pumped separately because it's considered contaminated waste or something to that effect. So that's probably where the cost of any replacement is going to be extensive because there need to be a redirect of those particular drains. One at least was allowed under very strict circumstances. I don't think those circumstances were followed. That was in July of 2001. Also at that time, the state of Wisconsin indicated that the leach field would need to be, with the expansion of the building, that the leach field would need to be extended and expanded. That did not happen. And so we basically added on to this building and remodeled this building and added bathrooms and showers and drainage systems and additional bathrooms without ever increasing the size of our leach. And that simply shouldn't have happened. And there's lots of questions as to why that did happen, obviously, but that'll need to be corrected. And there's plenty of documentation that indicates, what happened. At least now we know. I mean, before last year, we didn't even know. We were told that we had a leach field. We have no leach field. We have a cylindrical, basically cinder block structure, and filling that with water and whatever solids were in there, it wasn't what needed to be done as far as any kind of test. In fact, I was told by a firm who puts in septic systems that if you want to kill it, that would be the way to do it. So we'll hope that that's not killed at this point. It could be with less less demand on it and some warmer weather that, those soils will dry out a little bit and you can continue to use it. And then over time, determine the best solution. In my opinion, the best solution to that would be to hook up to city sewer. There's no reason to have city water, but city sewer. Not so much because there's a fear factor. Obviously, we have, soils that are appropriate for a replacement site, but because perhaps there'll be another addition that will need to take place as, either the office would expand or the fire department would expand. Then you wouldn't have to have any worries as far as sizing goes. You would size that properly to begin with, and you could handle it that way. The other reason that I would suggest that you don't go with an on-site septic system is because we really, and this is something we've talked about, we really need to redo or think about redoing the entire site here. It wasn't ideally managed as far as how buildings were set. In some cases, slabs were just used that were existing already and buildings put up on them. The doors don't close, things are just kittywampus. They're not expensive buildings, and so the discussion was a real fresh look at the entire site. We have 10 acres here to really determine how we should best use our site. And with putting in quickly a septic system and a septic field, we may limit ourselves as to our ability to manage that appropriately, because where it is right now, it would be a drive-through lane, and I think it would limit your ability to move. Part of that should be salt storage. With a properly reconfigured site, you could perhaps build a larger salt storage facility. Now that we've gotten the approval, that was something that was achieved this year through Mr. Vansky and myself. We were able to get permission to store our road salt here. We simply don't have a large enough area now for our entire season's worth, or a larger time's worth. So I would suggest that we perhaps take a look at that. controlling that salt has been a big issue for the town of Waukesha. We save a significant amount of money because now we order our own salt, approximately half of what we were spending before. And in years where the salt is reasonably priced, we should stockpile it. We've been spending about $55 a ton. This year, it goes upwards of $160 a ton, depending upon what kind of winter it's been and what the demand has been. So it would be prudent to have that building potentially planned for, and then be able to stockpile our own salt and have control of that and manage that process that way. Questions? Dunkin' Donuts, there's been a lot said about the situation with Dunkin' Donuts. What's a larger situation is just the oversight of the plan commission process. That plan commission process is still, I guess, in process, Jamie, would probably be the best way of describing it, and I think it can still be improved upon. Part of it is having information and having it early enough. I mean, this particular situation was one that frustrated me a great deal because I was aware that there was some issue related to the site. I couldn't remember exactly what it was, but I did ask Mr. Duker a number of times because I had a nagging issue that there was something related to the site that we needed to identify. To that end, I asked him to call Tom DeLacy, who was our planner at the time that this site was rezoned. He indicated to me in a follow-up conversation that I had with Roger that he had called Tom DeLacy, and Tom DeLacy assured him that there were no other issues, that there were no other considerations, and that I must be wrong. So, obviously, I do rely on other representations of our vendors. It's not possible to be hands-on on every issue every time. And I think it's important that the people that we employ are people that the town board can rely on for the full answers, the complete answers, because obviously it puts the town of Waukesha on a bad light if we're not able to provide information. In this particular situation, that is almost a 10-year-old document that was brought forward, and they'll be dealt with on the town board and plan commission level. They have done some research on that. I think it's an easily solvable issue. The plan commission and town board did the right thing by making the approval conditioned on the resolution of that issue, and so the town board and plan commission can handle that as they see fit in the next meeting or so. But that is the history of that. I would ask you to find the document that Mr. Marek represented. It was he referenced a 1987 document that said that no annexations were required to get city sewer and water. In thinking about the area on Sunset that was in the late 80s, I'm thinking that he was referencing that particular document. But I think it would be worthwhile if there's another document out there to get it. Obviously, it's never been used. Otherwise, more people would have city sewer and water. In fact, we're aware of many people that were required to annex to get it. But my bet would be that you can find that it is the document that was the agreement between the city and the town for the Sunset Drive improvement, and it had very specific limitations as to what houses on what streets would be part of that program.
You mentioned 1987 energy?
This is the note that I got from the debate the other evening, that he said it was in 1987. So I thought it was 1988 that this particular, I didn't go back to the file.
Well, as far as the island right here, across the street from Culver's, I think that took place like in 97, 90.
No, there was definitely a document from the 80s.
Way back.
Yeah, there was an agreement. Maybe what happened came later.
Okay.
You're talking about the Kohl's department store, or the Kohl's, you're right, the Kohl's, the entire, the decision to put that as a grocery store and all that happened in the 90s. But I think the expansion of the road itself was something that was determined in the 80s already, and as expansion went, it came in later years. But I believe you'll find that particular document is in the late 80s that actually lays out in U.S. jurisdiction. But that's an easily, obviously findable document. Okay, that's that pile. Now I start with my real list.
Fire
Are
away.
you ready? All right. Transition plan, we've already kind of dispensed with that. Obviously, it's unfortunate that John is not here to talk about those things. We were made aware yesterday, I guess, in a change of council's opinion on when the new board takes over. We were originally told that that was statutorily set now for the third Tuesday of the month. That would have been another week. That changed yesterday. That was a disappointment. That certainly was an easily fixable issue and should have been attended to. And I think it really shows that the town of Waukesha needs to have another layer of oversight. I feel strongly, after working in the office for 2.5 years, that a part-time administrator is something that would benefit the town greatly. Not at all to do with the capabilities of the staff. I think the staff does a marvelous job. But there are so many issues that need regular oversight. In other professionally run towns have administrators. In many, many cases, they have full-time administrators. Jamie is already wearing 2 hats. She's our treasurer and our clerk. When you're dealing with the elections like we had last year, you're dealing with lots of extracurricular activities like all of the open record requests that we had this year. It is just a tremendous amount of work to keep all the moving parts and pieces together. And the board, in its configuration, changes, and the capabilities, the skill set of the board changes regularly. And the ramping up of the knowledge base, I mean, we're all smarter, today than being on the board for a period of time than we were before. There's a lot of knowledge base there, but that knowledge base goes away when a new person comes in. And so they have to somehow get all that knowledge base. Having an administrator bridges that gap. It allows the staff to have consistent management because they're in the in-between, including the DPW. And it really provides another person to be the eyes and ears for, like this issue that happened with the change in the statutes. That person would then be responsible for monitoring the statute changes. And if the attorney doesn't bring it forward, that person would bring it forward. I don't think we need a full-time person. I think a part-time person would be terrific. And I think there's some retired administrators out there. I mean, this is a specific skill set. This is a specific education set that they have. They know municipal law. They know public administration law. And so they'd be a great asset to the current and future board if you would consider going this direction. To provide consistency, and I think they would pay for themselves by the ability to simply take care of projects like reviewing our insurances, reviewing our health insurance, reviewing, getting pricing that perhaps improves upon what we have now. There's many, many different areas. And simply a situation like this, where it simply shouldn't have happened. And it's impossible for a part-time board to do that. We rely on our vendors for this, but there still needs to be somebody in the middle. And certainly I've committed a lot of my time in the last 2.5 years because we've really taken the town of Waukesha from being vendor-based, vendor-driven, to managing the town proactively by the board. And I suggest that continue because we have reduced our expenses, we've rolled back our levy amount, and we've done all that because we've been more proactively involved in managing the bottom line. We do our financial statements internally. It's certainly not something that you're going to want to roll back, but that extra layer, I think, will cover those areas that we can't cover with a moving target of a board. Contracts, Veolia is up this year, as well as our sheriff contract. So both of those, the board will have to decide if they wish to bid out. And I believe Bruce Baker's contract comes due in June of this year. We've already talked about the snow contract. Confidential information I touched on earlier. For you incoming board members, there are specific laws and criteria that we need to follow. And I think it's important, especially for John, that someone takes him under their wing, whoever that's going to be. If it's the attorney, I know the attorney likes to get a short class. You got on Larry's wing? Okay. Well, normally the attorney will give a short session, to kind of give you the basics of what you need to know. But once you release certain types of confidential information, it really pierces that shield, that protection shield that we have, and other things are open. So before you release any document of any kind to anyone, you really need to check and make sure that you're that you're doing the right thing for the town of Waukesha before it's done. We've already had that situation in the last couple of days where it wasn't an appropriate thing to do. That goes to open meetings and open records, you know, learn what that means. We've put certain things in place to help you with that. One of them is using Outlook access. As a new board member, you'll have access to your supervisor account here. You'll establish basically your new account. Jamie monitors and is responsible for all records here, and so you'll have, you know, fresh supervisor number never changes, or the supervisor email address doesn't change, but your segment now will be new because that's your responsibility. Okay, and Jamie takes care of all of those from previous board members that go. What was very interesting is board members who have their emails, who use their personal emails, and even in the case where they're forwarding their emails, those emails are completely lost to the town records. Once that person is no longer on the board, their emails are no longer accessible by public records search or by any kind of open records search. And so knowing that information, we adopted a new program for most of us, which included using Outlook. Therefore, using Outlook strictly for your email provides a permanent record here at Town Hall of all incoming and outgoing emails. So if there's a permanent record of all communication that way, I think that's an appropriate thing to do. We're a public body, and it shouldn't be housed in someone's personal email account, and it shouldn't be lost to the public, especially in a chairman position, which has happened. You know, we had no access to any of the previous emails, you know, prior to us, and I'm sure there was important information in there that upon a public records search we should have provided, and we can't. So I would encourage you all to utilize that. And then attend the Wisconsin Towns Association seminars, knowing that there's a election this year. Jamie will be sending out to you lots of educational materials. I suggest you go. Those of us that went, I think, have an appreciation for, you know, the things that you don't realize you don't know. Being in government, the rules that apply are different than in business life. And it's important to understand how to protect the town appropriately. They're happy to do that for you, but you gotta attend and you gotta, you know, absorb the material. I think it's important that our zoning code be updated. We started that process a while back. I think there's some work being done by one of our supervisors. I haven't seen that back. Mr. Fisher has that project, and so we might want to follow up with him at some point in time and see where that project sits. The other is the continuing update of town ordinances. We know for a fact that one of the ordinances that has to be changed is the CSM approvals. Our ordinances say 60 days from time of submission. The state statutes are 90 days. There's no reason for us to have such a short timetable when the statutes are 90. So I would suggest that ordinance be changed as quickly as possible. Hector's identified a number of ordinances that have created issues for us in the past. And I think that as many as you can get updated as you recognize them, do that. And at some point in time, that entire town code book needs to be updated. But probably the zoning code is more important at this point. You can handle it individual town ordinances that come up. I've already talked about the administrator. We've already talked the finish of the overview of the site, the salt storage, the sewer hookup we've discussed. The phone system, we went to a T1 line a while back. We had significant issues of downtime with Time Warner cable. And so we did an investigation over a year and a half ago and went with a T1 line through Earthlink. And so we've tested that line now for a period of time. It's time to move over the phone system to it as well. Right now it's strictly our data. It's proven to be much more stable than Time Warner. So somebody's going to need to field that project, get a hold of our phone vendor, and have them be involved with that switchover of the phones. I didn't want to do it during election time, you know, during critical time, just in case there's a snafu and we have any kind of communication problems that you can handle in such a time that it won't cause any disruption to the town hall. That's going to be an important item to get taken care of. And as part of that, I would suggest that you get a bid from Manage Point to do a backup system. Keep the Time Warner because the fire department uses it. I know they you know, they have TVs back there for off, you know, downtime and such. Keep Time Warner and have the T1 line, but ManagePoint can quote you, and it shouldn't be very much money, a switch, basically, so that if one or the other is down, you can easily, staff can easily switch over and keep communication up here at the town of Waukesha. It's a problem when, we're not able to do it. And so I think that will ultimately assist and make sure that the time, we're always having uptime here at the town. Downtown for data or voice is just not acceptable. So I would suggest we do that rather than cancel anything. And I think it's a 3-year contract with Berkeley, so I think we'll be very happy with them. Finished legislation on the town of Brookfield, we'll already talked about. Okay, why don't we all just take a break for 1 minute? Have we heard from John?
I believe you.
No, I haven't heard.
They're the primary source of conviction.
Okay.
No, you can't go yet, it's not bad.
No, don't go there. Put on the spot.
And then when
Now you gotta
Larry
get it
comes
home.
back.
No kidding.
I was gonna say, it looks like it from,
Huh?
you look great.
I think. So.
Haven't you been taking
Doesn't
your
look like
air
I'm
horn?
sick at all.
Airborne and taken?
And my parting gift to you will be a large container.
Goodness gracious, airborne. Okay.
All right, everybody ready? All right,
Oh,
we'll,
yeah.
you ready, Jamie? Okay, we'll continue. My note is, don't mess up the town of Brookfield. There's been a lot said by John that we don't need to do that fight, that the DOA is never going to approve them. The fact is, the village of Sussex, the city of Brookfield, and the city of Waukesha are all actively fighting the incorporation by the town of Brookfield. We are not the only ones. And so they have on staff, full-time lawyers at those communities, the 2 cities, who are 100%, behind this particular fight and the need to maintain, the pressure on the town of Brookfield. The fact is that for the most part, the dollars that we spent on that have been spent. We simply now have to hopefully achieve the result that we're looking for, depending upon the court. There might not be any DOA hearing, or there may be an immediate DOA hearing. It will depend on what the court decides on the issues that are before it. So the big thing there is we should stand firm, we should stand pat. We need to get first the Court of Appeals decision. And then I would suggest that you meet with Dean Lang at that point in time and chart the course that's necessary at that point in time. Dean Lang is handling the appeal and the litigation side of it, and the Attorney Zyneman out of Seattle is handling the actual DOA, Department of Administration presentation that will take place. And the reason that we chose him, that was through a recommendation of Doug Hofer and Attorney DeLamora. They felt that their ramp-up time to understand this very segmented part of the law, incorporations are a rarity these days. There's just not a lot of them, so there's nobody that has great expertise in them. And so for them to ramp up and understand it and perform, at the highest and best level, they felt would not be cost effective for the town. So they did a search of somebody that they felt would be helpful to us. They came up with Mr. Zyneman out of Seattle. He wrote the 1999 denial of the DOA determination against the town of Brookfield's incorporation at that time. So he was an employee of the DOA. I believe he was going to school to be a lawyer at that point in time. He graduated and then moved to Seattle because his wife got a job there. So he's still very involved. He still knows people there. He's still very active in this particular part of the law. And so it's just done an excellent job for us understanding and creating the DOA document that will be ready for presentation. But that document needs to be kept secure, because that's really our argument. We don't want the argument getting out until it's DOA presentation time. So I'm very concerned with some of the discussion that's been in the newspaper that somebody's going to try to take a left on that, and we just need to stay on course, and we should be successful and hopefully successful here fairly quickly. The well monitoring program is still in place. This year we want to expand upon that with perhaps 10 to 12 more wells. Tina Reese, who's a Plan Commission member and a hydrogeologist with Symbiont, is on that committee along with Joe. I was on that committee, so there'll have to be a decision made if they need a 3rd member or not. But that well monitoring program needs to be ongoing. I'm told that the firm, Guthrie Fry, yes, was out. I haven't seen anything from them yet, but they were having their person go out the last month, so hopefully we'll see that shortly. That needs to go out quarterly, needs to be maintained and monitored. Is very important. The other thing that needs to be taken care of is the DNR step letter. You know, we had gone through with Attorney Lang as to how we determine when we're noticed of any well drilling permits for high-capacity wells. We sent that letter out probably a month and a half ago now, maybe 2 months. The answer back from the DNR was that they're not going to give us proactive notice of any of those, permit requests that come through. And so Dean Lang's recommendation for us is that we do regular emails or letters to them. So I don't believe a letter has gone out in the last 2 months. Of course, the city is very active in trying to pursue Lake Michigan water, but I would suggest that you set up a program where, on whatever regular basis you choose to contact the DNR, you do so in such a way that it's receipted, so that you prove, that your request went in and that you get an answer back. So if that's an email or if that's a certified letter or whatever it is, that a process be put in place to make sure that we're aware. The reason that it's so important is because Attorney Lang for the Lake Beulah area won a Supreme Court case, goes back 2 years now. And that changed basically some of the water doctrine in the state, where the DNR had taken the position previously that they did not need to analyze the effect of a high-capacity well. As I understand it, you can certainly confirm this with Attorney Lang, now they do. But they don't have to proactively go out and find the information. But if they're provided information that says there's going to be a negative impact, they need to take it into account. So that's the part that you're going to want to do here, especially if the city decides to, open up further, let's say the Lathers wells, and, reinitiate the permits there. If you don't know about it, you can't give them, the packet of information that would be the Lake Michigan diversion application. That Lake Michigan diversion application speaks volumes about the damage that would be done to having the well sets come into the town of Waukesha, and specifically those related to the Lathers property. So it's going to be very important that we monitor that, track that, have notice that a well permit has gone in, because you have a very specific window of time. You must submit the information for their consideration in a reasonable period of time. So that's definitely something that needs to be followed up on.
Is once a month overkill?
I think you guys just need to decide what's best, and maybe you talk to, DNR themselves and say, what's the full process? Is it a 60-day? Just make sure that whatever you give yourself, they can't make a determination in a shorter period of time than you're regularly contacting them. I think there's minimum time, like, 30-day window or 60-day window, but you definitely want to determine what that is and then have a regular. The city of Waukesha is going to be the one that, is going to create the issue. But I think a follow-up on that and a determination of what the best mode for that is going to be is important. So.
You could simply flag your computer, just simply remind us to do that sort of thing.
Yes, then you have to look at the computer and make sure that it gets done right. And then, it's not only the sending out of an email or letter, but the receiving back of that information, verifying that there have been no permits. So it's not just a matter of sending it, but it's a matter of receiving it back and noting. I think there needs to be a very formal program to make sure that happens, because as time goes on, that's going to become very important. Okay. The structure and function of Plan Commission submittals, and as you can see, these are in no particular order. It's kind of as they brought up issues and opportunities. I think there's still some work to be done there. I think that can be improved upon. I think there needs to be and should be more visual ability for the public to see on the screen what's happening in the use of the GIS site. That was something that we had hoped that the firm would bring. There hasn't been as much of that as we had originally hoped, but hopefully that can continue to be improved upon. Organization of files, Jamie's doing a wonderful job of that, reorganizing the files and making sure that very specific things, let's say conditional uses and specific types of documentation, is identified clearly and properly in the files, and we're identifying those appropriately so it's easy to retrieve them. I know there was just a real disconnect between the different members of people that were in that office. The assessor had one process, and the person who did the permits had another process. And the integration of all of those property records is important. Something that I think that you want to look at is one software that the entire town would use. That would be the town's software versus the vendor's software. There are property record softwares out there that you can use both for the assessment process, for the building inspection process, and for just day-to-day issues process. So there'd be a way to enter a complaint or a problem in the property record of the town of Waukesha, property record, and then everybody would have access to that. We'd be building a database that would be ours versus a vendor's. So if you change the vendor, you wouldn't lose all that information, and that way the staff who's looking for information will have to look for it, and then it's an electronic format that's backed up on the server. Talking about the server was replaced last year. It's a dual drive server so that it has redundancies and has a dual hard drive system within it. Plus we back up to the cloud. That confirmation of that backup is currently going to the chairman email. You might want to check with ManagePoint and see if that's going to come to you. Jamie had enough on her plate, so I was monitoring those backups. But we get notification daily that the backups for both the fire department server and our internal server is working. That we also installed a new HVAC system in there to cool that room. That was a problem for us previously. The light server that we replaced was having some real issues because that room is just not set up for server capacity. It should be in the 60-degree area, and we are now with the small HVAC unit that we put in there. It's working great. That server room is always secure. It's always under separate lock and key. Basically, our brain, town's brain is in there. It needs to always be secure. All right. Establishment of a road program. The town of Waukesha has never had an established road program. In most of the communities, there's at least a 5 or 10-year forward-looking road program. The town does use what's called the PASER program through the state, and so that particular software and database could and should be used to establish an internal road program. Colby had given us, and it was distributed to everybody, how to develop such a road program, and then how to monitor how you did. What we determined when we looked at how things were bid in the last couple of years, we did it very late in the year. That was only because one supervisor was providing the roads, and then by the time we got it to bid, it was late in the season. We weren't getting the best price. We weren't getting crews here when they normally would be here to do this work. Some of the crews, specifically for slag work and crack filling, come from different parts of the state. They're specialists in some of these things. They'll come early in the season. They'll look at the roads with you. They'll provide you some cost. And so when you bid, you already have an idea of when they'd be here. They work together to do that. Jerry and the crack filling people were out last week, and now he's going to be going out with the slag people this week. And so he's going to be bringing forward his recommendations for the first time this year of what he's identified as roads that need work. One of the things we identified is we have been doing a terrible job of being proactive with our new roads. It's very important that we do more crack filling, and we do crack filling from a company that really knows crack filling. It's just crack filling service out of Cross Plains. They seem to be the specialists in really professional crack filling. There's differences. It's not just hot tar and toilet paper. And specifically on our newer roads, so that when cracks do develop, that those cracks are filled as quickly as possible so that we maintain the integrity of those new roads, because once those cracks open up, the water gets in there, the ice, that's when you get all the alligatoring around those cross. And so there are definitely things we can do to save us money in the long haul, but being more proactive in that vein, and I strongly suggest that continue on that program. That includes to the establishment of capital improvement plan. There's lots and lots of roads that have deferred maintenance, and between the fire department and roads, I know there's always a concern to keep our taxes as low as possible, but the town has not done a good job of putting away monies historically to take care of some of these larger issues. And that deferred program is at some point in time going to really come up and bite the taxpayers of the town of Waukesha. We're limited as to how much we can increase our levy. So doing more, putting money aside and doing more proactive work will help us, keep our tax taxes at a reasonable rate. Plan commission appointments, there are plan commission appointments that need to be made. I believe John's aware of that, and it needs to be taken care of as quickly as possible. It's typically done in April. And also, I believe there's a fire commission appointment. There's also a Southeastern Wisconsin Fox River Commission appointment that needs to be made. And so that can be made at the next one. We talked about the communication plan, Time Warner and Earthlink. I suggest we set up, we're going to be getting this year an audio-visual grant of $12,000 that Jamie worked very hard on, so thank you, Jamie. The goal of that was to improve our audio and hopefully provide visual of our meetings as well. In the perfect world, depending upon what vendor you go to and how much work is done on the project, we might be able to live stream, the meetings. And that would be, I think, a wonderful thing. The idea of the grant is to provide access to people and provide improvement of people being at meetings and the experience of the meetings. And certainly there's many people who like to continue to come to meetings, especially in the winter, don't want to drive to meetings, aren't able to do it. I think that would provide people an opportunity to hold all of us in town government accountable. And so hopefully that will go well and be taken care of this year. The generator. We've had on our list to do a full site generator. We've had that priced out. We've had LP Energies here determine what's necessary. There's very little update there. There's some electrical work that needs to be done. There's already been a report that's partially done. You can check with Brian Fisher to see where that stands at this point. So I strongly suggest that generator for the full set of buildings, as you determine what the configuration back here is going to be done. We don't have an emergency site. If there was truly an emergency that happened in town of Waukesha, like happened in Eagle, a couple of years ago, sometimes there is devastation and people need to be able to communicate and have a place to go where there's going to be, water and heat. And I think this is the place for it. So we have a lot of that prep work already done, but that needs to be, somebody needs to take that project as the electrical questions and as the site-related questions get answered. And that's right, that didn't go forward until, we do a very proactive, smart decision there. Their office remodel, there is, I believe, $20,000 that's been set aside for office remodel project. We've got some layouts of that. On any of these projects, if there is a desire for me to work with Jamie on any of those, I'm happy to do so. I'm certainly not going to move forward without someone saying that they'd like to be involved, but I offer that to you in case there's some of these projects that you feel would be worthwhile to move forward by someone who's been involved with it. We also have a new phone system money set aside, so we haven't gone forward on that until we have the office remodel done. Those two kind of go together. There's some cabling work that needs to be done. Our cables here are very old, so as part of this project should be a complete review of the entire cabling in the entire building. We definitely need a new digital machine, which is these days a new scanner, fax, copier, printer. We have a lot of that information already set aside. It'll cost under $10,000 to buy what we need. The fire department desperately needs their own copier. There's no reason to buy them a separate copier. What we have in the office right now would be perfect for them. The reason that we need a new one in the office is because it doesn't do color. And more of our work that we do, our scanning work, because we're putting everything up on the web now for packets. We didn't do that previously, but again, to get as much information out to the public as possible, we've been doing that for 2 years. A lot of that comes in color. We can't scan in color. And it's just a really poor scanner. I think it's almost 10 years old. So copying, it does great. That's what the fire department needs. It's, reasonably priced. So I hope that project goes forward and that we get the staff the equipment that they need so that they can work as efficiently as possible. I have a call in to Jeff Rust of Rust Lock. He hasn't returned my call yet. Jamie might want to follow up with him to come in and change the locks on the office doors Wednesday morning. I left a message for him early in that day. That was before the transition yesterday, so there may be an interest in having those locks changed sooner than that. But I would suggest that because of the changeover in personnel here, the locks to the office itself should be changed. So that's the 2 doors. Plus the door that's the accordion door. The original exterior doors are the same keys as have always been in place. So the office doors were changed out when in July of 2010 was the last time. So I think that should be done again. We should be getting our new posting boards. We made arrangements with NOAA Robluski, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. He's doing an Eagle Scout project for us that will replace the posting boards on the corner of Glendale and Big Bend Road and in Stonegate area on River Road. And I think there should be on the agenda coming up to make those two-sided. That'll add about $500 to the cost. But there are many, many times that our posting boards simply aren't adequate for the appropriate posting that needs to take place, as Jamie's identified. I don't know how they did it in the past and did it appropriately, but there's no reason for us not to do it right this year. And so if that can be on the agenda and he provided that those additional dollars, I think that's my honest to proper posting boards are in place. We still are required to post. We do more than that. We put things on the web and we send it to the media, but in many cases our ordinances only require posting. So posting appropriately is important. People do check those boards and we certainly get calls, you know, with questions and such. The bypass, I'm going to ask Jamie to contact Charlie Webb. I believe that there's a request for us to view how we want to handle the sidewalks question for the bypass. In the submittals, the requirement on the bypass, the way it's configured, does require sidewalks. And the town ordinance does have a sidewalk provision, probably because of the Sunset Drive agreement in the 80s. Had we not had that provision in there, then we might not have been responsible for sidewalks. My understanding is we don't have a provision, but technically those areas that run through the town that have sidewalks of the bypass, we will be responsible for. And that means clearing those sidewalks and taking responsibility for the replacement of those sidewalks. So if the town wishes to have that or feels as though that's not an expense that we had planned on, I mean, you'll remember that memorandum of understanding was not approved by the town board. The memorandum of understanding that started the bypass project was signed by former chairman Bob Kelenic without benefit of town board review or public input. And so we went on record, I believe a year later, Joe, do you remember? Identifying, when we recognized that that was the case, we were on record identifying that we did not recognize that MOU because it did not go through proper process, and Chairman Kelenic did not have the authorization to even initiate the process at that time. So that needs to be, I remembered in how you go forward in the negotiation on the bypass. Even though the comments were made at the time that the bypass wouldn't cost us anything, it's simply untrue. The bypass is going to cost us something, first of all, in loss of homes and business access in some cases, so there's very direct impact on people. But it also, part of the agreement is that we accept some of the abandoned roads, some of the abandoned county roads. Those county roads have not been maintained. And so there needs to be a very specific identification as to if you're going to take those roads, what the status of those roads are going to be. Are they going to be brought up to current standards? You're adding an expense that you don't have today. And so I think that consideration needs to be taken very, very carefully. Five Diamonds. Right now, Five Diamonds is operating under its existing conditional use permit. I think everybody's aware that they pulled their review last year in September when they attempted to go to the city for annexation. That annexation failed. So at this point in time, they do still have their existing conditional use permit that has limitations just as they were last year. We've never taken any proactive steps as far as administering any kind of citations or ordinance issues on that. But of course, their position this year has been, gee, we couldn't have done anything wrong because nobody fined us. So you may want to consider strongly identifying when there are issues related to that. And you may want to follow up if you're going to do that with Attorney Moore to see what the options are as far as finding ordinance changes and such. But some people are under the understanding that they don't have a CU. They absolutely have a conditional use permit in place. It simply hasn't been amended or changed. And so the existing CU rules until the Plan Commission and Town Board make any changes that may take place at some point in time. Outlook access we talked about. Direct deposit should be pretty straightforward. I don't think you did? No arguments with direct deposit. Terrific. And communication processes, those will all go through. The annual meeting, and I was hoping John would be here so that we'd have confirmation of that. There's no disagreement in the statutes as to who does and the annual meeting. In an election year, the chairman, who's the chairman the day before the election, is designated as the person who manages and oversees and conducts the annual meeting. So it is my intent to indeed follow that responsibility and conduct the annual meeting next week. Tuesday, I did send an email, I didn't see the upcoming meeting in our upcoming section on the website.
Okay, I
So-
forwarded to Erin to place on.
Good, just so people would know. You might want to put something just on the website, big A annual meeting coming up, so people know that's coming up this coming Tuesday. And so I do intend on honoring my responsibility and conducting that meeting. It's really a meeting of the electors. We're there, we make a presentation. The chairman has, the outgoing chairman has a report on kind of the state of the town of Waukesha. And then we have all of our service providers there as well that do a short report and are available to the electors for any questions that they might have. So that will happen next week, Tuesday. And I believe that starts at 7 o'clock. And then we'll determine as part of that, we'll set up the date for the new annual meeting. It will now, because of the statutory change, that will always happen on the third Tuesday of the month, rather than the second Tuesday. And that is also an ordinance change that needs to take place, is that ordinance section, because right now we have our terms and on the second Tuesday, and we are annual. Allows for the third, because we can do it within 10 days, but it'd be best just to change it to the third Tuesday for our annual meeting as well. All right, that concludes my list, unless folks would have any questions.
Quick question.
Okay.
The fire department uses Time Warner, specifically, they cannot switch over to something universal.
Well, Time Warner is TV.
Same thing?
Yeah. Well, the benefit to Time Warner is it's cable, and so I really think for the $200 or so that you spend for that, having that as a backup system, I mean, we have had a situation where because of weather, AT&T went out and we didn't have communication, or Time Warner went out and we didn't have communication. You really can't afford to be in that situation because it always happens at the absolute worst time.
Sure.
And so, we have both of those systems in the town already. It's simply a matter of having a connection with the ability to switch over. That way the fire department is still able to maintain and have what they need. We'll have the T1 line, which is the stronger data cable. That'll help on the audiovisual things that perhaps can get done here as well. And then to have the ability to switch between the two will allow both the fire department, because the fire department is on now the T1 line as well for the firehouse runs and for things that happen on their separate server. So to have the ability to switch over so that they are always going to be online would be a good belt and suspenders decision to make. Any other questions? If I've forgotten anything, I will send an email.
Not right now.
No? All right, any questions from the audience, since there's audience members here? No? All right. All right, then if there's no questions, I think somebody
I'll
needs to
go
call.
to number 3 for an adjournment. There.
Earth.
Motion. Second. Yes.
For sure.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Angie.
Not quite.
Thank you.